Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I have a real special guest with me. I've been looking forward to this interview for quite a while. We go back a few years. And so today, I have Dr. Sherie Viencek is with me. We spoke on the phone earlier this year, and I say without exaggeration, in that 1 hour we spoke, I
Yeah.
think I learned more in that hour than I did all of last year cumulatively.
Oh,
So I can't wait for her to share what she's about to share today. Visiting here in Syracuse from the Sacramento area,
hmm
right, California. She's a practices functional medicine. She's a nutritionist and a chiropractor. Again, Dr. Sherie Viencek, thank you.
yeah.
Good to meet you
Thank you,
today, too.
Carl. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. Very
I'm really,
excited to
really
be here.
happy.
Yeah.
So, in my normal style, we're going to go organically free flowing, but I know
Okay.
we're going to hit on all these things. I would love for you to tell us about the work you do, just an overall picture, and then go down all the rabbit holes you want.
Okay. So I do functional medicine nutrition, and functional medicine is a model not based on symptoms, right? It takes in the complexities of the underlying health conditions that we have. So it looks at genetics and environment and diet and lifestyle, and looks at root cause of conditions and investigates like a Sherlock Holmes for triggers and antecedents. And I've been doing this work for about 25 years, and I've been a chiropractor for 30 years. So I've recently finished Bredesen's ReCODE program, and I think this kind of brain interest came about in 2016. I was in a car accident. I was rear-ended by a truck, and I had several herniated discs and a concussion and or a TBI, and it took me a long time for my brain to get back in shape. It took me about 3 months to realize that it really wasn't where it had been. So,
Mm.
anyways, it really sparked this deep looking at the brain and all the different kind of neurodegenerative diseases. And so today we're going to talk about the functional medicine approach to Parkinson's disease, at least how a lot of functional medicine practitioners are approaching it. And we know that, when Parkinson's is diagnosed, when it's diagnosed, there's a huge loss of dopaminergic neurons, probably like 70% in the substantia nigra. But we
Mhm.
also know that there's a smoking gun happening about 20 years earlier. And there's this known triad of constipation and loss of REM sleep and loss of smell and the microbiome disturbances. So the microbiome, I think, will be just moving into the forefront every single day. Um, More and more research is coming out because they have found out that Parkinsonians patients tend to have distinct dysbiotic patterns, and those dysbiotic patterns lead to higher inflammation in the gut. They lead to disruption of the bacteria phylums. They lean towards more H. pylori and SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So they also know that the inflammation from the dysbiosis creates a misfolding of the alpha synuclein protein, and then that protein starts attacking the enteric nervous system in the GI. And once that happens, it can travel up the GI from the GI to the brain via the vagal nerve, which is this nerve that's like a highway corridor from the gut to the brain, right? So
Mhm.
bacteria, viruses, hormones, neurotransmitters, everything can go up and down in this corridor. So these misfolded proteins end up in the brain, and we see these with Parkinson's and we see these with other neurodegenerative diseases. And so they are really not the cause. They are a symptom of what's been brewing and happening like a smoking gun for a long time. And they've actually found the alpha synuclein proteins in children as young as 5 years old. So we know it is not the end result of Parkinson's, right? It's like one of the pieces of the beginning. And there's a genetic component, and the research says that less than 5% is monogenetic,
Yeah,
right? That it's
that's right.
very small
Mhm.
part, and that environmental is gigantic. And I think the environment's been getting the attention, and I think the microbiome will start to get the attention too. And so, um, with the environment, I just want to say one more thing too. That alpha synuclein protein, there are fragments from that DNA that they have found that the immune system recognizes as foreign and starts attacking them, and it also attacks dopaminergic nerves.
Wow.
So this is another piece of how this inflammation and the alpha-synuclein protein feeds into the destruction of the dopamine in the brain. And the substantia nigra, where the dopamine is housed, so to speak, is very vulnerable part of the brain because it's not protected as much by the myelin sheath. And so it's much easier for toxins to absorb there. So we're going to just talk about the environmental picture. And, we have unfortunately, a society that is now just really loaded with environmental toxins and chemical toxins. And Rachel Carlson, when she wrote The Silent Spring in the 70s, right, talking about how we have to really understand these chemicals because there's going to be this latent period where we'll all be hit with something. And these diseases are, Parkinson's, what is going to double by 2050.
Yes.
So
like
we've
the disease of the century.
The disease
One of
of
them, Alzheimer's, dementia.
Most amount of disability
yeah.
in the country. So we'll talk about environmental toxins for a little bit. So we dumped 10 million pounds per year since 1954 of paraquat, and we've dumped 300 million pounds since 1974. So 1974 is coming up onto 40 years in 2024. So I did the math. That's 12 billion pounds of glyphosates. And glyphosate within 12 billion. So 300 million times 40 years. And if you glyphosate, not only is it toxic and it's an endocrine disruptor, and they use it on the crops, they use it while the crops are growing, and then they use it right before the crops go to the mill because it acts as a demulcent and the grain is not as sticky. And then sometimes people can get away with saying not using pesticides because they don't use the glyphosate while the crop is growing, but they spray it right before it goes to the mill. So it's very, very dangerous, right, this wording. But the glyphosate changes the tight junctions in the gut. So these, our villi are held together by these tight junctions, and that junction has a protein around it called xialin, which is held together by zinc and vitamin D, very important for that. But within 12 minutes of ingestion of glyphosate, there is disruption of the tight junctions, and within 16 minutes, there's complete opening of the tight junction. So if you have somebody that has a leaky gut, and they have a leaky brain, and their gut barrier is breached, their brain barrier is breached, you can just see how dangerous these chemicals become. So then we have...
Can we go back for a minute?
Yes.
This is amazing. Okay. So I don't mean to stop you, but I have to stop you for 1 minute. First of all, the best explanation I ever heard was just now about all this stuff coming, the pre-symptoms, let's say, and the travel pathway, vagus,
Yes, yeah.
gut to brain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard this and other things. I've written a couple of books about Parkinson's, and my son actually contributed to this because his PhD happened to be movement disorder, degeneration of the brain. However, your explanation of that was the most succinct, beautifully delivered. Go back and listen. The pathways, that highway,
Yeah.
the vagus nerve is like 9 interventions down here, 9 organs. I can't remember, but definitely gut. Okay, so
gut, brain.
And we come up to...
It exits off the base of the brain and connects to the gut and comes back up.
And now we go forward. Okay, we're looking at these... Dr. Tony Lang is a kind of a top neurologist out of Toronto. Really interesting gentleman. He also talks about the early symptoms of, lack of smell a lot of times, which could be a lot of things, but Parkinson's is one of them commonly. Not everyone loses a sense of smell, but many people do. Or years before. Diminished arm swing, maybe on one side at first. Could be acting out your dreams. That's another one. I wanted to ask you if you know about what you know about that, because we know that acting out, restless legs and all that can be something. But the other thing, though, I found really interesting you said is this whole leaky brain thing, because we hear about leaky gut a lot for many years. Not as much as we should. But there are only 2 people I've ever heard talk about leaky brain.
Yeah.
How does that affect us? I'd like to know.
Well, the brain has tight junctions. I have some beautiful illustrations, which I'll send to you, Carl. So, just like the gut has tight junctions, the brain has tight junctions, and the brain can become leaky from trauma and inflammation. And so what happens is when you have a leaky brain, then you're very much more subject to an inflamed brain, and you're more subject to toxins coming up the vagal nerve. And where is our primary way of ingesting toxins? I mean, is olfactory nerve, right? We smell and we breathe, and this highway to the brain. And I do want to say that I think what's going to really be on exciting forefront for Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative diseases is they're going to develop a lot of nasal sprays, like nasal peptides and glutathione, nasal glutathione, which you can compound, because you can get it in an IV and you can get it orally. And I use a trisomal glutathione, but getting it through the nasium. And I just want to say that I'll drop a few nutraceutical names as we go along, but at the end I wrap it all up. And on my website, which is sagefunctionalhealth.com, in lifestyle resources, I put a whole page on all the supplements I'm mentioning, and then I put all the labs that I'm going to mention. So you can just go there and take a look at that.
What's that website again?
Sagefunctionalhealth.com.
All right, so it'll be in the description below, and all descriptions everywhere where this is posted.
Yeah, and I do want to say about glutathione, and just in case I forget, that by the time Parkinson's is diagnosed, they say that up to 50% of the body has lost its glutathione reservoir. And we start losing glutathione after the age of 50 anyways. And we have to think about backtracking a little bit to this functional medicine model that no matter what diagnosis you get, you know, which tends to be midlife, right, 40 and above, we're all aging. And as we age, we lose enzymatic function, we lose digestive capacity, we lose our hormones, we lose neurotransmitters, which I'll talk about as we go on. And so it's not just this hyper focus on genetics and environment. We have to look at our whole body, the whole picture, right?
Can you explain what is glutathione for our listeners?
Yeah, so glutathione is a substance that's made by the body in the liver. It's a primary antioxidant. In fact, the World Health Organization has said it's the most primary antioxidant there is. And for all of you listening, if you've never watched Dr. David Perlmutter's YouTube, if you go to YouTube and you put in glutathione / Parkinson's disease / Vietnam vet, it will come right up. It starts with a 66-year-old Vietnam vet that has trouble speaking, trouble walking, cogwheel rigidity, balance issues, and he gets an IV of glutathione in the office, and then they videotape him.
Really?
And his speaking is normal, his gait is normal, and it's very emotional to watch when you realize what a single nutraceutical can do in a short period of time, but it's not long lasting, right? So I think that every single person that has Parkinson's should be on glutathione. And NAC is used as a precursor for glutathione, you know, generally, but I don't think that it should be used in this population because we need the big gun, right? We don't want precursors. We just want to make sure we're getting the end result. So I want to talk about trichloroethylene a little bit. So, you know, Dr. David Dorsey and colleagues who wrote the book, The Prescription, the Prescription for the End of Parkinson's Disease. I heard him speak recently, and he was talking about trichloroethylene and paraquat and DDT and glyphosate. These are cumulative for life. And we have to understand that by the time we get a diagnosis, something might have happened 20 or 30 years prior. And I want to give this example that he gave. I thought it's definitely worth repeating. So Bryant Grant, who's an NBA basketball player.
I met him in Portland a few years ago at a World Parkinson's Conference. Nice guy.
So his dad was stationed at Camp Lejeune, and Camp Lejeune had a TCE plume in their water for 2 or 3 years. And so the military was exposed, everybody on the base exposed to extremely high levels. Brian's father developed esophageal cancer, which is part of the toxic piece of this. His brother developed a rare upper respiratory condition, and Brian developed Parkinson's. And with Brian, they say that his Parkinson's isn't progressing like other Parkinson's they see, but what is the magic piece that Brian has is exercise. He's an athlete. He's been exercising his whole life, and he's been sweating. And when we sweat, we get rid of toxins, right? So sweating is a huge component of any kind of neurovascular disorder because underlyingly, every one of them can have a chemical toxic sweat. We got to sweat. So infrared sauna is the best. And in fact, you can invest in a home infrared sauna. There's a company called Relax that it's like an igloo and you zip it up and your head's out of it.
Oh,
There's the big
I would love
fancy
that.
heavy wood ones
Okay.
that are, thousands of dollars, but people can have portable little infrareds at home and they can sweat, especially like people who live in the winter and don't get to exercise as much. So, Dr. Dorsey also talked about this perchlorate, this dry cleaning chemical, and that they've done studies that people who live in high rises in big cities that have dry cleaning on the basement floor, that the TCE goes up through the vents, and everybody subjected to a high rise is getting poisoned, basically. They have found that if you pick up dry cleaning and you put it in the back of your car and it's outgassing and you have a child eating an ice cream cone, by the time you get home, within 20 minutes, that cone will have TCE in it because it outgasses and attaches to fat. So where is fat in our body? Our brains. Our brains are lipophilic. So all of our organs are surrounded by fat to protect them. So we have to think about that. This is where our toxins are going. They're going to our fat. And the detoxification of these chemicals has to be done carefully, right? I don't think I think that people who have any kind of neurodegenerative disorder diagnosis should search out some type of functionally minded person to walk them through the detoxification, because we have to make sure that our excretory elements are open, so our channels. So we have to make sure that our kidneys aren't blocked, the microtubules are open, that our gastrointestinal tract is open, that we're not constipated, that our liver is working, because the liver has phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification and everything's moving on through. And in phase 2, there's glucuronidation and acetylation and sulfation. And if those processes aren't working, then the toxins can recirculate back into phase 1. And this is how we stay in this very toxic place. And this is why when you tell people, most people say, I feel great when I fast. And then you'll get that percentage of people that say, I felt horrible. I had a headache. I was dizzy. I was sick. It's because they're not excreting. And so excretion is really, really important. And that's having the lymph system be very open. So I actually address detoxification gingerly, and I usually do about 3 weeks of a series of a detox kit that's a liquid homeopathic from Germany, from a company called Picana, that does a lymphatic, a liver, and a kidney lymphatic cleanse first, because it cleanses out the extracellular matrix and just kind of lessens that toxic burden on the organs when you start moving things. Okay. And so we want to talk about men a little bit, because, men are diagnosed about almost twice as much as women with Parkinson's, but we have to think about where men have worked. Men have worked in the orchards and in agriculture, in Navy shipyards where TCE was used to take grease off the diesels.
Can I ask, what is TCE?
Tetrachloroethylene.
Okay.
And it's a very toxic chemical. And it was used in the carpet cleaning industry. It's used in flame retardants. It's used in so many places. And so unbeknownst to us, we've been exposed to a lot. And just to say, there are organically clean dry cleanings companies out there now that are not using these really toxic chemicals.
Can I intervene for 1 second? Because everything you're hitting on here is so highly relevant. So not that it matters, but do you need those?
Yeah, I'm gonna I dropped my glasses. Yeah.
I was at Hershey Penn State College of Medicine, where my son did his work. His mentor, Dr. Shumei Wong, an amazing lady, she invited me to be in 3 different studies. Okay, one of them was an agricultural, 2 of them. No, one was agriculture. It had to do with paraquat application. So I've never done that in my life. So they need controls. And so they were having trouble finding men who'd never done it. So, but there is in that population of people who do that for a living, even if they're all in their hazmat suits or whatever they do. I believe this study was people, men 20 years and up of doing this particular type of job. Their rates of Parkinson's and other problems were much higher than the general population.
Yeah.
And I was also in 2 other studies, welder studies. I've never welded in my life, except for maybe once in high school in shop class, right? So the welder community from manganese sulfate, maybe some other things. They did a particular
Aluminum.
manganese. Yes, they did a
Yeah.
manganese sulfate study. That was the second one I was in, but the other one had to do with, I believe it was coal mining. So you don't just have coal mines, but the welders in the coal mines and all these toxins coming in,
Yeah.
and the rates of disease, cancers, Parkinson's, other problems for these populations. There are countless other populations too who have this, but it was really interesting to learn about the history, because as I think about what you're saying is, maybe 20 years, 30 years before, you can have these
Triggers.
these are in you, right?
These are antecedents.
And you may not
Yeah.
see anything, which as a former musician, and I hate to say this is actually really heartbreaking to me. I never got involved in drugs. I would drink plenty, and that's public knowledge. I don't anymore. But the bottom line is, for those who are doing cocaine in the 80s and the heroin and all this stuff, I mean, a lot of them have disease now. And it took about 30 years for the onset of whatever. It's like they went clean, they sobered up 20, 25, 30 years later. Boom! It's like, gotcha. Even after a clean lifestyle. And it's so sad to see, but it sounds like now, and I'm taking you off track a little, but I know you get back on, is it seems like these things, they get in your system, whatever it is, the drugs, maybe the foods, maybe the environment, through whatever means, they get into your body and they can just stay with you for a long, long, long time.
Your whole life.
Yes. Okay.
Unless they're chelated out. Right.
Okay.
This just reminds me,
Hence
something
the detox, right?
Hence the detox.
Yeah, okay.
This is a really important piece. I've heard other people speak to this and on podcasts, and I wanted to be able to shout through the computer that you'll be doing fine. Like you'll say, Parkinson's or else Alzheimer's. You'll say, my husband, my wife, they were doing just fine, and then we moved. And all of a sudden, they've had a relapse. Well, let's talk about that move, because first of all, moving is hard, right? It's a dissociation. If there's any cognitive decline, that's hard. But what happens when you move? You usually paint. You usually put new carpet in. You put new laminate in. There's tremendous amount of outgassing. And then I wanted to say that I think every practitioner of any type can say this truthfully, that every 10 years in your life, you look back and you think, oh my God, I wish I knew that then, right?
Oh, sure.
And I so much wish that I understood the mycotoxin piece, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But mold makes a spore, the spore makes a filament, the filament makes a mycotoxin, and the mycotoxin spills out thousands of mycotoxins that are microscopic, and they attach to everything, wood, paper, sheetrock.
This is the outgassing?
Can
you tell us what the outgassing is? Because I'm guessing it's the byproduct of the new things.
Outgassing is the byproduct of the new things, right? Because
so you're getting all these new
chemicals,
scents
coming up through the olfactory
Okay,
nerve, right to your brain, right to your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your substantia nigra, which is not very well protected, right? The frontal cortex. So outgassing is very, very serious. And then what happens what I used to hear from people in upstate New York when I was here is that they would say something like, I was doing really well, and then I went up to my camp, and when I came home, I felt really ill. Well, when you open the windowsills for the first time, when they have been shut all winter, there is usually mold from precipitation on that windowsill. And you open that up and the mold pops and the spores go everywhere, and the filament and the mycotoxins. So people are breathing in a ton of spores when they open up their camps that they're sealed for the winter. Opening up anything that's been sealed that has mold, right? And so there was a researcher at Rutgers, and she was an environmental researcher or environmental scientist, and she said she never really believed that mold could be that dangerous until Hurricane Katrina, when she had a home that was destroyed, water damaged. And she breathed in so many mold spores trying to clean that up that she became really ill. And so she started to do research on looking at mold and its effect on the brain. And they found that mold creates this chemical that they nicknamed mushroom alcohol, and it affects two genes that produce dopamine. So basically it knocks out these dopaminergic genes. So this is
genes?
Yeah, I do. I don't have the gene, no, but the Larkin-2 I'm going to talk about. Okay. Larkin-2 gets, you need B12. It's called 1-octin-3-OL.
Oh, wow.
But that's the chemical. I don't know the
That's
gene.
okay.
It creates
I'm just
a
curious.
deficit in two genes.
I've heard there are many genes that can mutate and
Yeah.
obviously make Parkinson's, but
So
interesting. Oh my gosh.
that
So this mode thing, this is
is
like a real
huge.
deal problem.
And it's not
Yeah.
so much the mold, because the mold gets cleaned up, but it's the mycotoxins left behind. And actually, Dr. Jill Carnahan did a really great. She's a functional medicine doctor in Colorado who's a mold expert. She did a really great um, compilation of how to get rid of mold, like in your clothes and in your apartment. And I have it. And if anybody wants it, they can email me, sagefunctionalhealth@gmail.com, and I'll send that to you, because actually borax is much better than using bleach for getting rid of mold.
Okay.
So, so
What's
we
her last
have
name again? Jill.
Jill Carnahan,
Okay.
Dr. Jill Carnahan. So we have these known antecedents and triggers. We have these, paraquat chemicals, TCE, glyphosates. And so what do we do about it, right? How do we find out we even have them? And so there's been some really wonderful specialty functional medicine tests that have come out. And there's a test called a total toxin test from a company called Vibrant America. And again, at the end, I'll summarize all these, and you can get them on my website. But it looks at 39 chemicals, 29 heavy metals, and 20 mycotoxins. So it's a way to just do a huge scope. And you want it, it's a urine test, which makes it really patient compliant to do at home. And I always suggest that if you should get that test, to do a week of sweating and to do at least 500 milligrams of glutathione daily, because you want to increase your excretion of these chemicals in the urine when you finally take your urine test. And the best way to do that is to provoke them with glutathione and sweat. And Great Plains Laboratory also does a really nice total toxin test. So we have to really look at this systemic way of detoxifying without disturbing the neuroimmune system and creating triggers. So we have to be able to go slow and gentle and detoxify. And that it takes time, and it takes knowing specific products. And those products or nutraceuticals are generally based on what's found in the test, like whatever chemicals come up or specific mycotoxins bind out better. Some bind out better with zeolite and coal and charcoal and glucomannan. And so you can, knowing which ones bind is really helpful. Something I was going to say about that.
I'm just curious. This is a complete random question. And then maybe there's no answer, or the answer could be different per person or per product, but is our dietary habits, let's say you're eating a lot of processed stuff, okay? Is that as bad as, or not as bad as, or worse than exposure to these other toxins like the mold and this and that? Well, do you have any?
I think the toxins are so much more on a scale of like exponentially, much more exponentially, because they're a man-made chemical that the body never knew how to metabolate, doesn't recognize
as something it can actually process efficiently or effectively.
And processed foods too. I mean, they have chemicals in them. I think it's a continuum. I'd say, chemicals, of course, because they're so powerful. Right? They're so powerful. There's a slide I sent Carl that he could post, that it's a woman who was spraying with glyphosates for 3 days, for 3 hours a day for, I think, 5 days or a week. And she developed within 15 days every single Parkinsonian symptom there was. And she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And they immediately put her on some kind of bromide and iodine and ATP and some other things in the hospital as IVs. And she was able to completely reverse all Parkinsonian symptoms. And so it's such a eye-opening experience. And there was another.
Which one is that?
This one is. It's not on this. I'll have to send that to you.
Because I'll be posting this in the slideshow.
There's a man, a farm worker, who fell into a vat of glyphosate and also developed immediate onset of Parkinson's disease.
Oh, jeez, really?
So, and then they were able to take care of him immediately. But these people, like, it was like the onset was so intense and so violent, right, that these symptoms came on. So I want to talk about some risk factors, because diet is definitely one, but mitochondrial deficits are really a risk factor, because we need our ATP to be able to exercise, and we know that exercise is really the gold standard for stopping the progression. And that's what Carl does here. And that's why his work is so profound, because that is really the known gold standard. And you need your ATP. And so toxins debilitate ATP, and the cell membrane.
I didn't know that.
Oh, they debilitate.
I mean, not like I actually know that much, but
yeah.
I had never heard of that, and that's fascinating.
Toxins debilitate.
That can actually, I wonder if that explains some of the lethargic we see.
Oh, absolutely, because there's no
people want to, and mentally they're ready.
They don't have the ATP.
Maybe even for me, I don't know, but
yeah.
But the other thing, just to parallel, is everywhere you go, it all comes down to this: exercise is good for you.
Yeah.
But the why behind it is so vast. It's absolutely so fascinating as to all the benefits. Do we even know all of them? We probably don't. But we keep learning and learning and learning. So please continue with this whole exercise thing, because this seems like it's the number one way to fight off or slow progression or manage or whatever. Okay.
I think the sluggishness, it comes from many places, but having toxins stop the mitochondria from developing, and so they stop mitochondrial biogenesis. And what happens is, as we develop motor symptoms and gait issues, inherently we slow down because we're afraid of falling. We're afraid of jeopardizing our health, fear of falling, fear of getting worse, pushing yourself too much, being extremely fatigued. And so we have to, I lost my train of thought here. We have to realize that slowly but surely we can build up that endurance. And Carl could speak to that, like I'm sure when he sees people come in and when they leave. But, when you do an exercise, say walking, your mitochondria goes do, it does this. But if you run on a treadmill really quick for 3 minutes, the mitochondria is like, oh my God, I'm being chased by a tiger, right? And so your body starts to have to try to make some mitochondria. You're going to need the raw ingredients, which we'll talk about. But this type of high intensity interval training is really helpful for stimulating BDNF, brain-derived neural growth factor, getting, growth factor in the brain to create more synapses, but getting these mitochondria to wake up.
Can I add something? I'm so sorry. This is so exciting for me to just learn all this stuff. So I have 4 things written down. Just here are the things that I think about with lethargic we see in so many people with Parkinson's, especially, or MSA, or, well, that's pretty rare, but still, Parkinson, let's say a dopamine deficiency type disease. We know that dopamine is a driver. It's a reward seeker. It drives us to reproduce, to eat, to hunt, to whatever.
Yeah.
Right. To go for the trophy, the degree, but also is a neurotransmitter. Right. So if we have less production, we may have less drive.
Right.
Right. So fear of falling, fear of moving, dopamine deficiency, those enough can cause some problems. But I'm so glad you shared about this whole mitochondria thing in ATP, and how this mitochondria can be like debilitated, basically, and reduced in abilities. And ATP, lack of production. I mean, that's a game changer. That just, to me, just added a whole, almost like an explanation of certain people I work with, that maybe this is a factor.
And toxicity is a driver of decreased mitochondrial function.
And a lot of those people are the ones who aren't eating well.
And
we're really trying.
Well. Yeah. Let's talk about gluten for a second.
Okay.
Here.
Oh, please. Yes.
So autoimmunity is definitely a precursor to expression of neurodegenerative diseases. And they have found that there is a gene that is associated with celiac disease, and I don't remember which one it is, that is also associated with Parkinson's. And also people that have hypothyroidism, over 50% of those people have Hashimoto's, but they don't know it because their physicians aren't running thyroid antibody tests. And so there is, once you have an autoimmune disease, it's very debilitating, and you don't want to have an underlying autoimmune disease with Parkinson's. And there is some research saying, is Parkinson's an autoimmune disease? I didn't bring that piece in because it's so complicated, and I only have a set period of time here. So we have to be aware that if you have hypothyroidism and no one has tested your antibodies, I would say 8 out of 10 people I test have positive thyroid antibodies. So you need to know that because these antibodies can get kicked up with viruses. And so Epstein-Barr is a great example of that. And Epstein-Barr was shown to reactivate COVID virus. So people had COVID virus, they kind of got rid of the symptoms, lay low. They have a mononucleosis. They do blood tests and they see they have high Epstein-Barr. And you see this with COVID. And then with COVID, it increases mitochondrial disruption. So it downregulated mitochondria. And they also noticed that the COVID created a loss of smell, which is also parallel to we see in Parkinson's. So COVID did a real number on the Parkinson's community.
It was horrible.
It was horrible.
Yeah, we really saw a lot of horrible
outcomes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They say that, with the cytokine storm that got kicked up, that the general population, there was a 5% mortality from what they would identify isn't from the cytokine storm, but in the PD, the Parkinson's population, it was almost 20%. It was 19.3. And there's a wonderful product that I want people to know about. I'll mention at the end, but it really should be mentioned here. It's called SPM Active or SPM Supreme. And they're these resolvents that resolve the cytokine storm. And they were used heavily in the functional medicine community for resolving all of basically the gunk in the lungs that prevented people from going on ventilators. The research came out of Harvard, a researcher who spent his life really uncovering this work. And I do believe that anybody with a neurodegenerative disease should be taking SPMs on a regular basis. There was a longitudinal study out of Italy that came out about 6 months ago, watching people for 90 days on SPMs and all the factors that got better. Very, very good for arthritis and all the autoimmune diseases, especially RA. I take it every day for my hands, but extremely important. So the cytokine storm, cholesterol. So I have a slide that I shared with Carl that he's going to share with everybody. I guess it'll be posted after the... Yeah.
I'm sending a note because I want to find out about something you told me about that I can't remember the name of that I use.
Okay.
And because I think it's helped my lung issues too. I've had a lot of respiratory issues over the years. But back to that slide. Yes. So this slide, you'll see it right now. It's going to be inserted as she talks about it.
Okay. So basically, cholesterol, has been the bad guy, right, for a long time. And the brain has a tremendous amount of cholesterol, and cholesterol is very cushioning for the brain. And we don't ever want our cholesterol to ever drop below 150. And I personally believe 170, and many other people believe 170. And when I grew up, the cholesterol, the bad cholesterol was 240, then it was 220, and now it's 200. and then the statins come out. And so cholesterol is the mother molecule that makes all sex steroid hormones. So you'll see on the graph, cholesterol's up here and it downstreams down and it makes all the estrogens, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone. What happens when you're a man and you're put on a statin and your cholesterol drops, and your cholesterol is what makes testosterone naturally?
That's what I
take. That's
an
SPM Supreme.
Yeah, I just wanted you to know. Okay, so I do take
the
that.
Supreme, the resolvent. I'll send you the Italian study that just came out.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we have a nation of men that are running low in cholesterol. They're on a track for early cognitive decline because of taking too much statins, and their doctors are not monitoring their cholesterol. So if your cholesterol isn't monitored every 6 months, you need to monitor it if you're on a statin. And especially if you're over the age of 50, because cholesterol is very important for your brain, right? So they have found that it is a total risk factor for Parkinson's disease to not have high enough cholesterol. I just saw a man, he was in his 80s, and he had been in the cleaning industry, carpet cleaning industry. So most likely he was had TCE exposure. His cholesterol was 121. And he has no energy, fatigue, low testosterone. And unfortunately, in our aging population, values aren't checked a lot, right? And so we have to be a squeaky door. We don't know what we don't know, so we have to know about these risk factors and
advocate for these
people. Yeah. We need a lot of advocation. Iron is another one. So high iron is a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. And if you have low iron, if you have high iron on more than 2 blood tests and you look at your iron binding capacity and your saturation and your ferritin, I then suggest that you get checked out for hereditary hemochromatosis, because you do not want to have iron storing in your organs, because it's oxidative and it lowers your body's ability. It lowers mitochondrial function, right?
What was that word again?
Hemochromatosis. So it's a genetic disease. Okay. So iron is something that has to be tested. And then I want to talk about dairy a little bit here, because dairy inhibits uric acid. And Dr. David Perlmutter wrote a really great book called Drop Acid. And it's interesting because Alzheimer's patients do horribly on uric acid, where Parkinsonian patients do fine on high uric acid. And yes, no pun intended, a great title.
Really, that is
Drop
a good
acid.
title. I love that.
And the other thing with dairy is that it has pesticides and hormones in it if the dairy isn't really clean. And we don't need animal hormones, and we don't need any more pesticides, right? Which is going to be glyphosates. And back in the day when women were first put on hormone replacement, if you remember, they were put on Premarin and Provera, and Premarin was the estrogen from horse urine and had metabolites that our own liver was not capable of metabolizing. And that is why that early cancer clusters came out with women on HRT, which has now been refuted when they have redone the studies with natural bioidentical estrogen and natural bioidentical progesterone, because the original studies were done with synthetic progesterone, which is called progestin. And very often in the research, they switch those two words up, and you have to look really clearly, because I was really irritated. I saw a study that came out talking about a cognitive decline related to progesterone intake, and it wasn't. It was progestin. It was the synthetic progestin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So hormones and neurotransmitters. Like I could talk for a couple hours here, because I really love hormones. And I did a podcast a couple months ago in July, just a month ago, on hormones, and I'm going to try to figure out how to upload that to my website with help. But every decade, our hormones are going down, right? And so by the age of 50 and 60, men are in andropause and women are in menopause. And hormones help, these trophic hormones help our brain. Estrogen is neuroprotective. Progesterone is neuroprotective. They are anti-inflammatory. They help with cognitive decline. We need our hormones. So if your hormones have not been checked, please check them. And I really like using salivary tests. You can do them at home. And the difference is blood is the gold standard because it's been around for a long time, but saliva and urine are actually much more helpful in my belief system. So, and that is because when you test a hormone in the blood, you're looking at a hormone bound to protein. That hormone travels to the receptor site and has to be unbound from the protein. They call it free fractionated. And then it has to hit the receptor site. Whether it ever gets in the receptor site or not, nobody knows, because we don't have any tests that test inside receptor sites. Yes, I think probably in 10 years, maybe we'll have these tests. But when you do a salivary test, you're looking at free fractionated hormones. So you're looking at something that's much more readily available for the receptor site. And they're really easy. You spit in a tube, collect 5 mLs of saliva between 7 and 9 in the morning. And for women, it's really important to know that there are 3 estrogens. There's estradiol, estriol, and estrone. And estrone is kind of a bad actor. It has metabolites that contribute to breast cancer and uterine fibroids and cysts. And so we really need to know that, because that particular estrogen keeps recirculating, and we have to have good detoxification pathways. And for men, in that slide that Claro put up earlier, the downstreaming, testosterone can downstream into estrogen. And you see men when they have a lot of belly fat with metabolic syndrome, and if you run salivary tests, you'll see that they have a lot of estrogen. So here's this testosterone, and it has an arrow over to estrogen. And so you'll see this in young teenage boys that are taking in way too much testosterone, and they start to get breast tissue. They have, big bellies and gynecomastia. And it's really sad to me, because I see them and I think, they're very estrogenic. They have way too much estrogen, and no one's ever going to test them and catch this. They're teenagers, right? No one's going to start thinking about their hormones. But for men, they really need to do. I run hormone tests on all my male patients, and a great percentage of them are downstreaming, losing their testosterone going into estrogen, or losing their testosterone going into DHT, dihydrotestosterone, which is a very toxic chemical that creates benign prostatic hypertrophy and prostate cancer and male baldness. So you want to really know where these chemicals are going, and the only way to know is to test. And so I think this is the underlying piece of functional medicine. We really have to know how we're functioning. Like, how's our neurotransmitters functioning? How's our hormone functioning? How much chemicals do we have? Are we loaded with mold? And it all sounds overwhelming, because it is, because keeping healthy is a big job, but you can choose to do one of them. You can do like a total toxin test and work on that for 3 to 4 months, and maybe take the year and split it up and say, this year I'm going to do 2 tests on myself. So that's how, it's time and money and application to apply what you learn from the tests, and to not go too quickly so you don't detoxify these things. So hormones are really, really important. And I just want to talk about nutrient depletion for a second, because L-DOPA is known to decrease B12. And Mount Sinai just did a really interesting test on that gene that you mentioned, the LRRK.
They call it Larky.
Larky
And at the
2,
conferences, yeah,
LRRK2,
yes,
I think.
Thank you.
And that gene is very much affected by B12. So they put, I'm not sure what they put in a test tube, whether it was Parkinsonian cells, but they found that the only ingredient that was able to change that gene in the lab was B12. So I just want to say that that's really important.
Can you go back to the thing about L-DOPA, so levodopa, and nutrient
depletion. So L-DOPA depletes B12.
Does this have to do anything with what they recommend about the timing of levodopa in relation to meals or protein and specifically? Or,
I don't know that, but I bet that's true.
Yeah,
I bet that's the whole
And I can't
picture.
even remember. I wrote about it, and
yeah,
sometimes I just can't recall all the things I want, but there is a timing that's very important to pay attention to, so you don't
that'll be your
let's
next
say minimize the effects of the levodopa or the nutrient dopa.
Yeah.
Because
So
too much L-DOPA,
over time.
I mean,
Yeah. So it has a shelf life.
I mean, I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm going to just, if you don't mind, I want to tell a story.
It's your podcast.
I have 2 stories, and maybe you can speak to one of them. I'll make my public statement, and I'm known for this, and I'm not angry. I am, but I'm in a good mood. But I'm very upset that there's so much blatant, in my opinion, malpractice. So here's how I look at it. We have people who come into this clinic, my place, and I'm no doctor, but they are diagnosed with Parkinson's. Well, I have no tests. I don't do tests. I do assessments, a lot of different ones, cognitive, memory, movement, especially, a lot of different fancy things, VO2, right? We got clinical grade stuff we use. It's great. But after a while, a couple weeks, a month, I usually, if they don't have Parkinson's, I'll have a conversation. By the way, I know you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, but you don't exhibit a single sign of Parkinson's. Yet they're on levodopa, they're on Cinemet, they're on some dopamine replacement. They're hyper-gambling, hyper-shopping, hypersexual, or they just go to sleep. Because sometimes too much dopamine will make you sleep. And first of all, when they go for a second opinion to Rochester, because I don't send that to anybody here. Not that I send anybody anywhere, but I recommend get a referral to Rochester no matter what. We've had many times we get a phone call or a text when they leave there, same day they're out there. Guess what? I don't have Parkinson's. Or the likelihood of me having is very small. And, a few days later, they haven't been taking dopamine and they're back to a more normal state. They have some other problem, probably. They need another specialist, but there's a lot of misdiagnosis out there. And there's also a lot of testing that's just not happening. That needs to happen. This is driving me crazy because I see it as negligence and malpractice. But one story is a gentleman, he's 80 years old. When I mentioned this to him and his wife, because she mentioned his behaviors were different, more binge-like. And I say this in a kind of a joking way, but it's not a funny thing. He's chasing her all over the place.
Yeah.
Very hypersexual.
Yeah.
She's not interested in that much, I guess. So whatever.
Or at all.
And I said, well, or at all, maybe. Yeah, that could be the case. So anyways, in this particular case, I'm saying, well, I think it'd be really, really important to address this with your neurologist, if you're going to a good one, or get a second opinion about your dosage. And because maybe they'll want to diminish it. He just looks like, no. Which actually is heartbreaking, though, because he's used to being a certain way. He likes that way, yet he can't function well because too much dopamine can get you into the dyskinesia, and so he's not moving well because there's way too much movement. But the reason I'm telling you all of this stuff and intervening is only because you're talking about so many important and vital, in my opinion, tests that can be done. They can yield so much information. So a much more comprehensive intervention can happen through somebody like you or through you. And that I just want to bring all these to the forefront and saying that this stuff is so important. It's so important to test it. We're going to talk. I want to do business with you. I'm going to be, if you have room for a patient, I want my hormones tested.
Yeah.
Because there's things that I'm concerned about for me based on my past and my genes.
Yeah.
And I can't, knowing this, I can't not test myself, and I can't highly recommend enough testing yourself as soon as you can, because we're only in this spin one time, and I want to try to get it as right as I can and live a good, I want to live real old and real well and then die fast.
Yeah.
I don't want to slow death that
wish.
takes me 20 years to die, But anyways, I completely derailed everything, your track you were on. So let's continue.
No, you didn't derail
the testing is really important.
But
do it.
I want to speak to that because I don't prescribe, so I'm not up on the medications, but there is a certain medication that is prescribed for PD that has that side effect with addictive personalities, hypersexualization, addiction. And I don't think it's L-DOPA, but I could be wrong. I don't know dosaging, right? So maybe at a certain point. But I know that Dr. Dorsey says he never, hardly ever recommends that medication because it destroys people's marriages and family and lives, and people have lost, savings, all their savings with the addictive personality that comes out of the medication.
True.
Yeah. So
very true. I've met people who have lost.
That's so sad.
And I remember one lady in England in particular who just went and spent everything on eBay, and she actually didn't.
That's the malpractice. That should be discussed up front with the whole caretaking team, right? Yeah. That should be in writing. That should go home. Somebody should be monitoring that. That should never ever happen.
So she was able to sell a lot, get money back, but for a while there was
heartbreaking.
The savings is gone.
Yeah,
they can barely eat, and that's real life stuff that happens. So continue, please.
On a good note,
yes.
So we know that L-DOPA, carbidopa has a 10-year shelf life, right? That at a certain point, people start to habituate out and they need to go up and up and up. And then after they go up to that end, then they can't keep going up. So then new medications have to go in. But there is something called acetylcholine, which is a natural substance made in the brain. Yeah. And there's research out that says that you can just PubMed acetylcholine.
Yeah, that's the magic
that
one.
250 milligrams twice a day has been shown to lower the need of L-DOPA by 30%.
You can take that as a supplement?
Yeah. And I do actually, it's on my list.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
great.
I printed it. So, and then Azilect, which is an MAO,
yes, that's very popular.
Second medication. It slows the progression of Alzheimer's, is what it's supposed to be doing. But also I wanted to shout out that turmeric is a natural MAO inhibitor also. So there are things in the natural world. I mean, I don't know how much turmeric you would have to take, but just to know that, I mean, it'd be a good idea to be taking turmeric anyways. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's a wonderful antioxidant, right?
You mentioned Alzheimer's, so Azilect, Parkinson's as well?
Azilect, Parkinson's as well. It's been shown to show.
Is that more of a cognitive type of thing, or is it for all symptoms of both?
The research I did, which was only really in preparation for this podcast, was kind of an exciting breakthrough to show that it slows the progression of Parkinson's, where the other medication only helps fill up dopaminergic
Oh,
neurons.
okay,
So it's a
okay.
completely different animal.
And they use it in Alzheimer's as well?
Use it in
I didn't
Alzheimer's as
know
well.
that. That's actually really, that sounds really
Yes.
good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have to have like this call to action, right? And so the call to action is exercise, exercise, exercise,
Yeah.
right? And then diet. So, Carl alluded to that, like processed foods. It has to be a highly dense nutrient diet. Organic as best as possible. By the age of 50, we have, consumed a fair amount of chemicals, especially since the 70s is really
Yeah.
when it got really bad, right? When you look at the 70s and then you look at 1997, the input of things coming into the trajectory is off the top. So, nutrient dense diet, staying away from processed foods, and I don't know if everybody's aware of the Environmental Working Group, their website, ewg.org. They have the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So they have the most heavily sprayed 12 foods and then the cleanest foods. So that's a great website. You can look at the breakfast cereals that don't have glyphosates in them, especially for kids. Great sunscreens, just a great resource. And so I'm a true believer that gluten in wheat is very detrimental to anybody that has a neurodegenerative disease, because gluten is heavily sprayed with glyphosates, one of the most heavily sprayed crops. And I will post a slide of the relationship of the crops and how many pounds of glyphosate, soybean corn, and wheat being, I think, the three highest. And it's very inflammatory. The gluten, the way it hits the agglutination in the gut makes the gut very sticky, and it basically like clogs up the gut. So gluten can also attack the cerebellum and the skin. And this is
Oh,
the thing where
gosh.
people will say, well, I eat gluten and I feel fine. I don't have any stomach issues. Well, 50% of unexplained white matter lesions now, they claim, neurologists who study this, are related to consumption of gluten. So gluten is actually puncturing holes in the cerebellum. If you wanted just to, have some kind of crazy example, that it's very detrimental to cerebellar function. And there's a test by a company called Vibrant America. It's called a wheat zoomer, and it looks at all the different proteins in wheat. And there's these gluteomorphins, and these gluteomorphins mimic opioids in the brain.
Mm.
So when you eat gluten, it feels really, really good, and it stimulates these morphine receptors. And that's why for certain people, it's extremely hard to give up. Like when they give up gluten for a week, they crave bagels and pizza and beer, because their brain is used to getting these opioid hits. And so we have to recognize that it's a very, very powerful effect on the brain. And, skin lesions and hair follicles, a lot of hair loss can be related to gluten. And there's a gluten ataxia. There's a complete walk that
Really?
is attributed to gluten that's
No
very
kidding.
much like in MS. They see this with
Wow.
MS.
I had no idea.
So, the call to actions, we have to protect ourselves from toxins and, water, air. The air pollution is also a direct risk factor for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and the air is getting more polluted. I really am a true believer of people living in big cities to have air purifiers. The air in upstate New York is really, really good air here. So I don't know how necessary that is, but I have an air filter in every other room in my house, just because I live in the Central Valley right now, which is not really not good quality air at all.
I'm going to interject 1 second. So I did an experiment a few years ago because I had experimenting with this chronic bronchitis and respiratory issues that I'd had for years. And as it turns out, as a non-smoker and secondhand smoke in bars and clubs, COPD, right? Upper lobe scarring in my lungs. Okay. So now it's downgraded to asthma. I've been doing some fairly aggressive, I would say, treatments for 1 year as of this month. And but one of the things I tried years ago was I needed to stop drinking anyways. Stop drinking, no beer, no alcohol, no wheat, no gluten, and no dairy. And I did it for 30 days. So I hadn't been able to breathe through both nostrils in months, right? And I was at SU going to school, and trying to get the finals. I missed some finals. I ended up taking them in different times. They arranged for me. I was so sick, but in 30 days, well, first of all, after about 3 or 4 days, I was able to breathe through both nostrils after quitting all those things: gluten, wheat, alcohol, dairy, no cheese either, and I love cheese.
Huge.
So, 1 month later, I'm down 10 pounds.
Yeah.
1 month after that, I'm down 20 pounds, and I needed to lose the weight. I wasn't the 289 I used to be, but I was still in the 230s, right? I needed to be down more towards 200. So, and plus I had energy. So then I had to go to New York City to do something, probably a podcast, my early days of my interviews. And on the way back one Sunday night, I was just absolutely ravishing hungry. So I stopped at Subway. Sorry, Subway. But anyways, within 5 minutes of eating any bites of this complete congestion, felt horrible, bloated and swollen up. And so I didn't go back to gluten. Occasionally I'll have some here and there. I pretty much avoid it. And it's really helped me a whole lot with how I feel and my energy levels too.
It's inflammation.
Yeah.
I mean, that weight loss comes from, dampening down the inflammatory response. And also I just want to say there's enzymes, that have endopeptidases and these exopeptidases, which are gluten splitting molecules. So I think it's really nice to keep splitting. So when you travel, so gluten is a very long molecule, and it basically chops it up into little pieces so that by the time it hits the gut, it's fairly unrecognizable. So it doesn't create the same inflammatory hit to the gut. And I generally travel with them. There's a couple companies. Apex makes a gluten product. Metagenics makes a gluten product. Medica Integrative Therapeutics makes a product called Simulase GF-CF, gluten-free, casein-free. So it has both casein and gluten-free splitting enzymes. And these are really important to travel with because we all get stuck, right? We get stuck at airports. We get stuck overnight and there's no food options, right? But sometimes a vending machine. And French fries, I mean, it's sad to say, but sometimes they put gluten on French fries to make it fry better. And so you think you're eating, potato and you're safe. So I have tons of handouts on all the hidden places that gluten is. But yes, I mean, you go off dairy and gluten and almost everybody can lose 7 to 10 pounds in 1 month because you dampen down the whole inflammatory mechanism.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. So gluten, protect yourself. Oh, so a diet. So, the ketogenic diet's getting a lot of really, really good publicity, right, for neurodegeneration, because when you have the brain using ketones and digesting fat, using fat for energy, then you are able to not be reliant on glucose. And it's very, very good for neurons in the brain because it's very anti-inflammatory. So I think looking at like a keto type model diet with low carbohydrates and having what's called Dr. Dale Bredesen says a keto 12-3 flex, which is eating in a 12-hour window and then not eating 3 hours before bed. And this not eating 3 hours before bed is really crucial because about 10 years ago, it was discovered that we have a lymphatic system in the brain called the glymphatics with the G.
Yeah, right.
And this lymphatic system's job is to clear the brain out of foreign proteins and fragments and toxins and chemicals and flush it out. But it doesn't have any capacity for expansion and contraction. So the lymphatic system relies on the vascular system that it leans into. So it's the expansion and contraction of the vascular system that pumps the lymphatic system.
Wow.
So if we're eating right up until the time that we go to bed, then our body's digesting. And if there's any kind of food particles or allergens that we're allergic to, then the brain, especially if you have a leaky brain, if you have a leaky gut, the brain is having to deal with those all night long. And the brain's job at night is rest and repair. So I think that all of us, everybody, to maintain our health should not be eating 3 hours before bed. Oh, and then sleep, because REM sleep disturbance in Parkinson's is a huge piece. I mean, good sleep hygiene is really important, and getting off the screens and having blue light blocking lenses, et cetera. And that's a whole nother talk in and of itself. But sleep is vital. And a good sleep comes from not eating 3 hours ahead of time because the body's not digesting. And when the body's digesting, it also creates in Chinese medicine what's called a lot of liver heat. And liver heat rises in Chinese medicine to the brain. So having chicken and coffee and alcohol, those three things create a lot of heat at night. So just making sure that you have that window of time. So
Can I
yeah,
ask a question?
of course you can.
Sometimes I wake up at night and I know my body feels hot,
Hot,
temperature hot.
yeah.
And I can usually correlate it with something I eat. Is it possible that my body is just warmer because I ate something
Yeah.
like ice cream before bed?
Absolutely. It's
Okay,
fat.
okay.
It's high density calories. Absolutely. Yeah. For me, if I eat like closer out of that 3 hour window, I will be so hot and my metabolism just heats up really quickly. Ice cream, for sure, coffee, and any kind of fat because it's so dense in calories. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
But see, that's because you pay attention to your body. These are all the beautiful symptoms that our body, it's like the gluten with the Subway. Thank God that, we get these red flags from our body, because if we didn't get the feedback, we would continue bad habits
I was so hungry.
forever.
I could have gone to the gas station and bought a bag of Doritos or something,
Well,
or a Slim Jim,
equal
but
disaster.
so I'd rather have something more filling.
Yeah.
And it just, I learned, actually it was a good learning experience of how much my body can react to something within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm both nostrils. I can barely breathe through them. So I'm breathing through my mouth up Route 81, coming up from Scranton, And I wasn't right for a couple of days because it didn't set well either. I mean, that whole thing didn't feel good. It didn't hurt, but it felt weird.
And it's the yeast.
Oh,
and then there's dairy and the bread and the chemicals in the cheap bread.
Continue.
Yeah, it's the beautiful. It's really great to fall off the wagon with any of this, because it teaches us how to write it and how responsive our body is, especially the cleaner you get. The cleaner you get, the faster the symptoms come. So I had been gluten-free for about a year, and my daughter was having a party at the house, and I was mopping the kitchen floor, and the pizzas arrived. And it was a very unconscious behavior. I grabbed a piece of pizza and I started eating it. I was starving. And then about a half hour, I started getting hot and itchy. And I went into the bathroom and I had 50-cent piece size welts all over my chest.
Gosh.
So it had this huge immune reaction, because see, the immune system's always being activated if you are sensitive to gluten, right? But if you don't eat it, the immune system quiets down. And then it mounts this gigantic reaction because it recognizes of things that are foreign and things that are unhealthy. So I learned a very big lesson there. That was the last time.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the functional medicine specialty tests. We talked about the toxin test, the heavy metals. We talked about, there's two other tests I want to talk about. There's a comprehensive gastrointestinal stool test that Genova does. And there's a GI map test that Diagnostic Solutions does. And these tests are about 7 to 8 pages long, and they look at all your phylums and look at the balance of your good bacteria and bad bacteria. And they know that with Parkinson's disease, Des-sulfur fibro, which is a sulfur bacteria, are very, very high in Parkinson's. It's part of the dysbiosis. And that alludes to the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because sulfur and hydrogen are the two bacteria that overgrow. Okay. And so you look at all these phylums and you get to see all these bacteria. You get to see what grows out, what PCR testing. So if there's any DNA, what grows out in a test tube. If they look at inflammatory markers, digestive markers for fat and protein, it looks for worms, parasites, protozoa. And then if it finds pathogenic bacteria, it actually tests it out in petri dishes to show you what antibiotics it would be sensitive and resistant to, and then what natural herbal products it would be sensitive and resistant to. Okay. So because the dysbiosis and the gut inflammation is such a big part of Parkinson's, I think that people should really consider doing some baseline gut testing to look at things like, you see H. pylori a lot, you see SIBO a lot, you just see a really unbalanced dysbiotic gut. And that's what I see. There's also a very comprehensive test from Genova called a Nutrival. It's a comprehensive assessment looking at intracellular vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids and amino acids. And I'm probably missing some, but very comprehensive test for people that want to say, what am I missing? What if I was to look at everything in my body nutrient wise, am I missing folate or B6 or B12? It's a really good look. Cyrex has a test called a lymphocyte map test that maps out how all your lymphocytes are doing. So people that have Parkinson's that may have long COVID or have reactivation of a lot of viruses, like you'll see reactivation of Epstein-Barr and Parvo and cytomegalovirus, and people have high viral titers. That's a really good test to do. In my office, I have a test called an oligoscan that's spectrophotometry, and it shines light through the palmar surface of the hand. And in several minutes, it measures the refractory rate, and it tells you what vitamins, minerals, and heavy metals are there in real time. I used it in collaboration with Dr. McGrath, who was a dentist here in Syracuse, a biological dentist. And we would ascertain people's heavy metals burden prior to getting their amalgams out. Because if they had high heavy metals in the tissue and they were already having neurological symptoms, then you have to go really slow with the amalgam removal, maybe just a tooth or two at a time. But what we would do is we would design a detoxification protocol to do for like 30, 60 days to beef their system up, give them lots of glutathione, open up these pathways for detoxification, because when you're drilling a tooth, there's always mercury that's vaporizing. And so biological dentists are trained to trap that, to vacuum it, to ozone it, but regular dentists aren't. And so people who have amalgam fillings replaced are really subject to a lot of amalgam vaporization.
We've traced a lot of Parkinson's. I say they're neurologists and other people have been involved in research with, mostly in Europe, especially in England, looking at mercury in the fillings and mercury, especially probably, you can't prove a lot of stuff.
Causal agent.
But for Parkinson's and getting, for some of them, when they had their mercury fillings, what kind of dentist did you go?
Biological
dentist, and replaced. Actually, symptoms have been reduced in many cases, not every one of them, but because maybe it was another agent. But that mercury thing's a big deal. Then we come from, I don't know about you, I'm 62, so I'm a baby boomer. My generation comes from mercury fillings.
Tons of mercury.
Right. So,
And I hate to admit this, but many of us as kids, when a thermometer broke, we would play with the mercury balls.
With the mercury.
Yeah.
Because it's so cool.
Nobody knew, right?
Yeah,
and dentists who were handling it have some of the highest rates of mercury toxicity because they did not know. There's a association called the Institute, Institute of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, the Institute of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. You can find by zip code if there's biological dentists near you. You can find a resource library that's chock full of information on mercury and fluoride, and it's at detriment. And fluoride bumps iodine, and iodine is really important for the thyroid. And I do want to say that when people get mercury fillings taken out, and if they have a lot and it's not done by biological dentists, those vapors vaporize right up neural tissue to the brain and vaporize right to the thyroid. And I've seen women go into Hashimoto's storms and thyroid storms because they get hit with all this mercury that dampens down their thyroid, and they get go right into a subclinical hypothyroid. And then if they have Hashimoto's, what will happen is the mercury vapors will destroy some of the tissue. And when the tissue is destroyed, it releases thyroid hormones. So it can release a bunch of T3, which upregulates metabolism, because that's what T3 does. It regulates metabolism, and it'll create a tachycardia because the heart will start racing because the metabolism jacks up. And oftentimes people that have tachycardia and irregular heartbeat are really having a thyroid storm. And unless their physician is really aware of A, thyroid storm, and B, Hashimoto's, and C, that the person has Hashimoto's, they may not put that together. And that's the really beautiful thing about functional medicine, is looking at that piece, because I've seen women with COVID. We saw people that had never had Hashimoto's start spiking thyroid antibodies after COVID. And then we saw people who had Hashimoto's and it was under control, had not had any symptoms in a decade spike Hashimoto symptoms and have tachycardia all through COVID.
Holy cow.
And everybody was thinking it was the ACE receptors and it was heart related. And it may have been because we had, an incredible increase in myocarditis in both the young and the old, especially boys and men. But it's thyroid related. And so the thyroid circulates, I think, all the blood in the body in several minutes. And so it's a very, very metabolic organ. It's about the size of a walnut, right?
Sure, right.
So, yeah. So getting different types of testing is really helpful. So let's talk about the regular testing. So I do have a list. So this would be the preferred standard laboratory testing. So this is where you can go to Lab Alliance and LabCorp and Quest, right? So these are the things you want to consider. And I'm going to try to create these into a panel. I'm going to see if I can get them into a panel. But C-reactive protein, which is just a measure of inflammation in the body. We all need to know that, right? Homocysteine, because that is a measure of how we're methylating, and how we're methylating has to do with being able to clear toxins and also our mitochondrial function. Full hormone panel, which I mentioned, full thyroid panel. Full thyroid panel means not TSH alone, which is what the standard is. It's TSH, it's total T4, total T3, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, thyroid globulin antibodies. In California, we can wholesale that out through LabCorp for $88. Okay. Each one of those tests is about $50, $60. And in New York State, there's no wholesaling. So if you're listening to this podcast and you live in a different state, you are more than likely able to use Direct Lab or Principal Lab, any of these labs, and get these panels run, which are really inexpensive and really helpful. So standard lipid panel, because we all want to know our cholesterol, we want to know our triglycerides, but also a cardiac IQ subparticle test that Quest runs to look at all the subparticles, because the subparticles are more important than the cholesterol as far as leaning towards atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis, but a vascular compromise. Because although Parkinson's is a motor disease, you don't want to compromise vascular system, because then you're not giving enough oxygen. Then you find into mitochondria and ATP. And with Alzheimer's, it's a direct link to cognitive decline, is lack of healthy function and vascular and the nitric oxide. And I just want to say one thing, that very recently there was a glycocalyx that has been discovered. So there's this new gel-like substance that's inside the endothelial lining of the arteries. And this material is very, very important for the artery's ability to expand. And that expansion allows us to have more oxygen and nitric oxide. So it's called the endocalyc matrix. There's a lot of information on it. There's a product called Arterosil, which comes from fruits and vegetables that feeds the endocalyx. So anyways, that's just a side note. So going back, so hemoglobin A1C, just for looking at glucose and insulin, comprehensive metabolic panel, which usually gets run, iron panel, right? So iron, ferritin, important, B12. We need to know our B12 because of the effect with DOPA. A CBC, just to see if there's high white blood cells in case there's an infection. Uric acid, really important, because if there's low uric acid, you don't want low uric acid with Parkinson's. Vitamin D, absolutely right. You want it to be over 50, somewhere between 50 to 70 to 80. If your vitamin D, everybody will say your vitamin D is normal at 30. It's not normal. You're basically at the bottom risk for bone fracture in the 30s, but vitamin D acts as an immune enhancing nutrient over 50. So you need to have that blood level over 50. And people that have any kind of autoimmune disease, especially celiac, do not absorb vitamin D well. So for me, I have to be up around 10,000 daily to get a normal D on blood test.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
I'm so sorry to derail your
I got two more.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So fatty acids,
Yep.
fish oils. So we'll talk about the importance of DHA, really important for the brain. And then there's this urine test called an F2 isoprostane, and it's used for prostate to look for oxidative stress in the body. And it is a urine test that can be run at LabCorp, and it basically is a measure of how rancid we are. So it's a really helpful test, right? So I'll stop there before I get into nutraceuticals.
Well, no. So I'm thinking now we're doing a lot of focus here on helping people to do a lot of things. But one of the things is to begin this process of trying to build some bone mass, some bone density, right? And I could go down the geek road right now. I'll try to spare people, but when we look at type 2 muscle fibers and their responsibility for, you know, high output, short duration sprints, jumps, things like that, that's one thing. But they're also very important in the role of balance, right?
Mm.
They get less oxygen, so
Mm.
they are actually the first ones to go as we age of the two
Mm.
types, right? So even if somebody doesn't have a diagnosis, we still see that. Well, the last study I looked at is age 65 and up, and there's a lot of different studies, different ages though. Is falls are a large concern for the
Mm.
aging population. Okay, um, here's an example. Study shows, according to Dr. Peter Attia, do you follow him at all?
Mm.
Okay, you're going to want to know.
I do.
Um, you break a femur, you're age 65 or older, you break a femur. Okay, of all the people studied in this, thousands of people, half of the people approximately 1 year later who broke a femur were dead. The other half weren't back to normal yet, mostly.
Mm.
So breaking a bone, having a fracture, falling down, um, that's bad enough. But there are factors that can contribute, like not exercising and doing resistance training that can help you to train your muscle fibers to help you balance better.
Mm.
Strength, foundation for movement and
Mm.
balance and mobility, walking, everything.
Mm.
Um, but also this whole thing about lack of muscle mass in relation to bone density, right?
Mm.
So we know that walking and impact forces and running maybe and jumping but let's say other things like resistance training the mechanical action of that can trigger the chemical reaction that helps to grow the trabecular soft tissue. Um, so with all that said, there's a spiral that can Atsuga calls it the death spiral. I hate to use
Mm.
that word, but you know what? You think
Mm.
about it, the worst thing that can happen is, well, no, it depends upon how you look at it. Let's just say one of the worst things could be you fall down, break a femur, and you don't ever go home or you don't wake up or whatever. You pass away for some reason. What a horrible outcome. So we can work preventively towards, not having the fall, not breaking the femur,
Mm.
actually navigating better for a longer life. That's the idea. But I am wondering, besides, let's say you take somebody who's training and they're 91 years old, like somebody who you just saw in here a little while
Mm.
ago.
Mm.
She's doing what she needs to do, but has osteoporosis.
Mm.
Is osteoporosis oftentimes a part of the aging process, even if they're active, or is it also a part of what's in our body, the toxins that have come into us,
Yeah.
and is it affecting our bone density?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, lead for sure stored in the bone.
Really?
And oh yeah.
Yeah, I believe that. I
Yes,
mean, I just
and think about the
never.
lead paint that we were all exposed to. Yeah, toxicity
Yeah,
in the
especially when I
bone
was a kid. Yeah.
is huge. The bone is a living, growing, dynamic substance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you have cortical and trabecular bone. And at menopause, in the first 2 years, you'll lose 30% of your cortical bone for the drop in estrogen.
Yeah.
So, all of these pieces are dropping, and if we keep if the good growth and trophic factors are dropping, and we have toxicity, and we have immobility, and we have inflammation,
Oh, inflammation.
the bone is
There you
is a,
go.
is a
There you
is
go.
is another
I
organ
forgot
in a
about
certain
that.
way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that's replicating itself that
Mm-hmm.
cannot keep replicating itself under that situation. So inflammation is really key. I will give a shout out to a great book here on osteoporosis. It's called The Whole Body Approach to Osteoporosis by Keith McCormick. He is a chiropractor in Massachusetts, and he himself was a long distance runner who fell on the track during a run and had 7 compression fractures in his thoracic spine.
Ooh.
As I remember it. And that led him on his path to understanding how could such a young athletic man have compression fractures. And so osteoporosis is so deep and so connected to so many functional body functions
Mm-hmm.
that but the thing about these type 2 fibers, are they activated by high intensity? Like high intensity interval training, does that reactivate them more?
Yeah, they can, like if you're doing box jumps, jump roping,
Yeah.
all kinds of things.
There's a new supplement. a
High
new
intensity, short duration.
high intensity
Yeah.
short duration.
Mhm.
I'll post this. I'll add to the post of nutrients, but Designs for Health has a product called MyoStim, and it has this product, and I don't remember the name, but it's kind of a methyl butyrate product. So forgive me for not remembering the name, but they developed it for the purpose for athletes to be able to continue to to develop muscle when they're injured. So this product will stimulate muscle development without exercising. So
Wait, what is this
the
called? Because I
product,
want that.
so I'll give you the actual name. I can look it up for a second at the end here and I'll tell you the name. But Designs for Health has a powder called MyoStim, and they've put that in there. And that product is designed for people to help build muscle, people with sarcopenia, people that are recovering from chemo or an athletic event in which they're going to lose muscle. Because we start to lose muscle fiber in like 16 hours, right, of immobility, something crazy like
Yeah,
that.
it
Yeah,
is. I mean,
yeah,
look at the people who go into a hospital for a
yeah,
week.
yeah,
How long does it take to get back to where they were?
yeah.
For some of them, it's a long time. Weeks.
My daughter was hospitalized for 6 days. She has severe bronchiectasis and her lung collapsed. So she had a pneumothorax and she lost almost all the muscle in her body.
Oh,
She's very thin as it is, but it was heartbreaking to see how much muscle was lost so quickly. Um, yeah. So osteoporosis is related to so many factors, but diet, inflammation, hormones are extremely important for osteoporosis.
well, we see two things real quick.
Yeah.
The most concentration of, let's say, patients or clients we see with osteo seem to be postmenopausal women, and then there seems to be a higher incidence in women who've had cancer who are postmenopause too. And I don't know if there's a relation between the
Yeah.
menopause hormone changes and then maybe the tamoxifen and the chemos and what they
Yeah.
do. But
Yeah.
this is something we see.
Yeah.
The other thing I was wondering is regarding T scores. I know the breakdown between good osteopenia,
Yeah.
osteoporosis, but what would be just a horrible T score, like a negative what?
Well, under, negative 2.5 is the demarcation between
Right.
osteopenia and osteoporosis. But I mean, when you start seeing high scores, but the thing about the T scores is you're comparing yourself to a 25-year-old. The Z score is age max
Okay, that's
related.
the age related one.
So it's really important to match yourself with age.
Okay.
Ideally, we would
Yeah.
love to all be 25 and be able to
Yeah,
be
sure.
matched there, right? But that's the important piece. I've seen so many women turn around. I actually, at one point, had a very bad osteopenic, almost osteoporotic score, and I turned that around in a year.
Mm.
I was in my 30s,
Mhm.
right? So these things can be
Okay,
turned
so
around. And natural progesterone, I just want to say that progesterone, is going down like estrogen, and we are very estrogen dominant because of all the xenoestrogens in the environment, the plastics, et cetera. They keep hitting estrogen receptor sites, and so just by nature, women and men are more. Well, I'll say women. So by nature, women are more estrogen dominant because of the xenoestrogens. And if estrogen and progesterone are going down at menopause, but you're getting this hit of estrogen because of the xenoestrogens, then the estrogen progesterone becomes unbalanced. And progesterone stimulates osteoblasts, and the blasts are the builders. So we need to be rebuilding our bone. That's what I did. I went on natural progesterone and some herbs and supplements, and I just kicked that around. So I see a lot of low progesterone. And I also want to do a shout out here that progesterone acts as a relaxant to the bladder wall. It acts on prostaglandins. So women who, and men too, but more women who are having urinary incontinence and going to the bathroom all night, very often are extremely low in progesterone. I had an 84-year-old woman who her daughter brought her in. I did all her hormones. She had almost no hormones. I've never seen anybody ever have almost absolutely no hormones registered, right?
yeah.
Her progesterone was the lowest I ever saw. We put her on a compounded I think it was maybe 100 or 200 milligrams of prometrium at night. Within 1 month, she was not getting up. She got up every hour of the night, which disturbs your
Okay.
cortisol, disturbs your
Oh,
melatonin.
terrible. Yeah.
She got up one time a night. Just that alone. Just think of the
So you're
chance
talking
of
about
falling.
progesterone.
Natural progesterone.
Oh
And
yeah, fall risk and
we
all
put
that.
her on estrogen, DHEA, testosterone, and progesterone. She had no anything, right? But progesterone will relax the bladder wall. And if the bladder wall is relaxed, it holds more urine. Just think of the risk factor of falling. It goes up if you
Oh,
get up
it
every
does. You
hour
know,
in the middle of the night,
yeah, and you're
right?
sleepy and you're half awake
Right.
maybe, and it's dark. Okay, let me ask you this, because
Does any doctor say that to you? You know, how many times a night are you getting up to urinate now that you have
only
this
one I know who's
disease?
upstairs here.
Yeah.
He's the only one who would, right? Except for you. So, but let's talk about this. This is really interesting. We have a couple people who come here who have some bladder issues, like overactive, and if they
bladders.
don't get to the bathroom fast enough,
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
They have to pee often. Can this help?
They need to do a hormone test.
Okay.
Yeah, they need to and see how low their hormones are because estrogen too is a great helper for just integrity of the tissue. And as we lose estrogen, the vaginal wall gets very dry, and then women are much more prone to getting vaginal UTIs, urinary tract infections.
Yeah, that's just
because it's there. The mucosal layer is gone because the estrogen's not there, and it's much easier for bacteria to just start traveling up the urinary tract.
Yeah, and that can raise hell with, pardon my French, but with cognition and all
Any
kinds
infection.
of confusion and so many different side effects. And
yeah.
Well, let me ask you another question.
Oh, can I say one thing? So
yeah.
many elderly have undetected urinary tract infections, and there's a little grouping of symptoms that goes with that, and I'm not remembering it, but it has to do with not thinking well, like all of a sudden not making good decisions and not thinking well because there's a high infection going on and it's not being recognized.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can speak to this, but I'll ask anyways. I know of people who've gone and had through the urinary tract Botox injections in the bladder to calm it down, if you will. Is there a comparison or a recommendation? And I understand that you probably have to know the patient and a lot of different things, but between the progesterone treatment and Botox or both together, or any comments at all?
So I think Botox should be the last resort because it is a neurotoxin, and if you're already we are all compromised as we're getting older, and you have to detox that. Botox has been actually shown to trigger Hashimoto's in Hashimoto's patients. So women getting Botox on their face and especially their neck. So I think that we try to do it the natural way, right? We make sure we have enough essential fatty acids. We make sure we have estrogen and progesterone. Sea buckthorn is a really great lubricant as a oral. Sea buckthorn is an oil.
How do you spell that?
SCA, buckthorn. Making sure your EPAs are there, your DHEAs. We're going to talk about DHEA and looking at your progesterone levels and estrogen. If you get your hormones on board, if you get your nutrients on board, and still, and also what's triggering the bladder to contract. Citric acid is a big contributor. Are you drinking cans of tea? Are you drinking cans of iced tea? So cutting out citric acid, being aware of what foods stimulate the bladder to contract in the first place.
Yeah.
Cutting out the foods, taking in the nutrients, and then waiting and see what happens in 1 month, 2 month, 3 month. And, then finally, if there's nothing, I think it's an end result. And Botox has done wonders for, people with headaches and upper cervical muscle spasm, et cetera. But I personally think a neurotoxin should be our end game player.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Because people I'd like to talk with about this as a non-doctor.
What
I'll do is have them listen to this because I think they should be.
A full spread hormonal test like we talked about is $150. You don't have to go through insurance. It's not on your record. Nothing's ever.
Beautiful.
Right. And I want to say one thing about records. Okay. So I know we're on Parkinson's, but the risk factor for Alzheimer's is an APOE4. So there's 4 different APOEs, and APO4, only 15% of the population has that genetic makeup, is homozygous for APOE on both sides of the family, but it presents 70% of Alzheimer's is APOE4. So that's a gigantic population at risk.
Have potentially as many as 2 copies, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it has been told to me, I sent a patient of mine to Kaiser, which is an HMO in California, to get an APOE4 test. And he told her that if she gets that and she's positive, she'll be refused long-term health care. That's why I'm bringing this up.
No, wait a
That,
minute. Wait.
yeah,
Can you go back?
yeah.
What did you
So
just say?
if she goes and gets an APOE4 test, and if she is positive, because it's such a strong risk factor for Alzheimer's, she will be refused long-term health care insurance. So
Is that even legal?
it's a good question. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
We have to ponder this. So I called a kind of a guru I knew in functional medicine Alzheimer's community to ask her, because she runs huge amounts of Alzheimer's patients through her clinic, and she said yes, they have seen this happen. So I do want to tell people there is an online take-home test for APOE4. So there are certain tests that I want to do in the privacy of my home, and I don't want on any insurance
this
record.
online take-home is not going to show up
Nowhere.
Okay, good.
You go to Amazon, or you go to APOE4, Google it, you'll see the company that makes it, you order the test, and you do it in your
Then
home.
you just know yourself.
Only you know.
Oh.
So
Okay,
because
beautiful.
long-term healthcare doesn't want a population of Alzheimer's patients because it's going to be expensive, right? Memory care where I live right now is averaging $6,000 to $8,000 a month. A month. Okay, so like
per person.
Per person.
Month.
So you're going to have to take me out to pasture, because there's no way that there's going to be resources for $8,000 a month, right? So we all have to think about this, right? And what does memory care do? It just sustains you. It doesn't try to break the cycle. It doesn't try to bring in the 5 subtypes that, Dr. Bredesen has identified as being contributors. He's reversed 500 cases legitimately.
Yeah, he has.
So
ReCODE.
and people have stopped the progression of Parkinson's with all of these different nutraceuticals and exercise, and bringing in acetylcholine and treating the brain. And it's all hopeful. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, and I acknowledge that, but we don't have to do it all at once, right? We can say, okay, what are my 4 things? I'm going to make sure that I have ample vitamin D because of all the studies with vitamin D in the brain. I'm going to make sure that my DHA, which is the component of EPA and DHA fish oil, is at least 1,000 milligrams. Mm-hmm. So I take DHA. So EPA, DHA comes in many forms, and there's a million supplement companies, and you want to have at least 1 gram of DHA a day for Parkinson's patients. Absolutely bottom line. And so 2 to 3 grams is probably really helpful of a combination. So you want to have some EPA. I do like 1,000 EPA. I do 1,000 DHA. And then every so often, every couple times a week, I'll take an extra DHA, right? Mm-hmm. But if I had Parkinson's, I would probably be doing, as long as I didn't have any issue with blood clotting or blood thinning, because fish oils can thin your blood, I would be up to 2 or 3 grams a day.
Interesting. Yeah, because I have a very rare clotting disorder, which I can't remember the name.
Factor 5.
It's something that I take heparin shots for because my body doesn't deal with coumarin well.
Yeah.
Antiphospholipid.
Oh, antibody.
An
antiphospholipid antibody.
Yes.
Which got really provoked with COVID, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I had my blood clot when I arrived in Singapore. I knew something was wrong, and then I went right to the hospital. So that was my first time as a patient in a hospital overnight. Was in Singapore. It's pretty interesting, and they have great medical.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was there and not some other places.
Yeah.
I didn't fly for a couple of weeks. I flew back sooner than they wanted, but I had to get back. But I had COVID twice. Just doing the shots, but this is it. The reason I mentioned that is this blood thinning aspect of the fish oil.
And SPMs too.
SPMs.
Possibly, but you only take, what do you take, 2?
I take 1 in the morning.
Oh, yeah, 1.
Is it okay?
Yeah, 1's okay. 4 to 6 is what a lot of people therapeutically get up to do.
Okay.
So I wanted to say something about the blood thinning. Oh, I just lost it.
How much vitamin D?
So how much vitamin D depends on your blood test. So if you're taking 5,000 a day, which I would recommend everybody take, and you do a blood test and your vitamin D is in your 30s and 40s, then I would recommend you take 10,000 a day and in 3 months test your D. You want to get it above 50. I have a specific gene called a VDR SNP, which doesn't allow me to digest D well. And that's because I'm gluten sensitive. And all gluten sensitive, and most, I can't say all, I'm going to say all celiac patients have a VDR genetic SNP. I don't know about just non-celiac gluten sensitive, but it doesn't allow the absorption of vitamin D very well. Mm-hmm. So we need to check our levels. And some people I know, the regular medical establishment would just be poo-pooing this, have to take 20,000 because vitamin D can be toxic. But I very, very rarely ever see anybody get their vitamin D up to like 90 to 100. And if they do, then you just say cut back.
Yeah.
Maybe cut back it for the month of August while you're in the sun and let it come down by itself, and then go to 3 times a week. And then in this latitude and longitude, nobody here will make vitamin D after October 15th.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. So if you don't take vitamin D supplement in the summer, you have to start taking it in the fall. The lowest vitamin D values I ever saw in my life was when I took blood draws here in New York. I saw single digits of vitamin D, 4s and 6s and things like that just seemed impossible to me. That's really low. A lot of teens. But I mean, so K drives D into the bone. So if people are low in D and K, how are they going to have healthy bones? Right? So that's another factor.
Yeah.
If you have celiac, unchecked, undiagnosed celiac disease, and so there's so many things that are undiagnosed or unfound that are contributors to what we have, and we just have to dig.
That's fascinating. So let's go back to blood thinners. Let's talk about the fish oil and the fact that can thin the blood.
Fish oils can be a blood thinner. Are a blood thinner.
Would we wanna have any blood tests done in general before we take it, or especially for people like me with my condition, or we're on a blood thinner already?
Yeah.
Should we regulate, or figure out how much to take?
Yeah, that's a good question, Carl. And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't even know if you ran that by a hematologist if they would. But what you could do is check clotting factors and fibrinogen and platelets in your blood. And if they're in normal levels and you introduce fish oils and then you test it, like, say, 1 month later, 6 weeks, if that really hasn't budged, because these are your clotting factors that are going to tell you, you're probably safe at that dose, right? And you could up it up a little bit and retest yourself.
Okay.
And see, getting tested is the key too, because, when you're on Medicare, it's like twisting an arm. And then if you don't have an open doctor, like, I cannot tell you how many times I've requested full thyroid panels and it's got shot down and it's not necessary. And I have to write a letter saying T3 sets the whole metabolism of the brain. And T3 has been shown to help people who are, what do they call it? Who are resistant to SSRIs. So there's a group of people who are chronically depressed who are resistant to SSRIs. And when Stanford did this study, when they added in T3 as a sole ingredient, a sole pharmaceutical, then all of a sudden they were able to assimilate their SSRI better and their depression lifted, because T3 acts on the brain, and it's a great getting rid of brain fog. People who are chronically in brain fog very often have low T3. So if you don't test the whole picture, you don't know what you have.
Have you written any books?
No.
You should.
Yeah.
Get it out there.
I think we should write a guide, a nutritional functional guide to Parkinson's. So people just have this little 25-page thing, right?
It would be so good. There's some stuff out there, but none of it is bad. It's just that I'm not happy with. I feel like it needs to be so much more comprehensive.
Yeah.
And it needs to include things that I haven't seen included anywhere, like the things you're talking about.
Yeah. I went to, as I was preparing for this podcast, I went to the Michael J. Fox website and a couple of websites, and I was so disappointed with the lack of other. Like, it's the standard and especially the microbiome. I mean, there has to be something. There's so much. I want to read this too. So I'm going to get into the nutraceuticals. This is Lactobacillus plantarum, PS 128, the strand. It's a specific probiotic known as a psychobiotic, which is demonstrated to alleviate motor deficits and inhibit neurodegenerative processes in Parkinson's disease model in mice. Okay, our guts are not that different than animal models. And so if I had Parkinson's disease and I knew that, I would want to make sure that I was having Lactobacillus plantarum. Most people are taking a probiotic anyways. Check and see if this strand is in there, right? It's a Lactobacillus. I have the list. Yeah, okay, I'll give you this. Lactobacillus plantarum. So we have to really understand the dysbiosis in our gut, and we have to make sure that we have the really good phylum being present and the bad guys on the lower end, because it just contributes to the dysbiosis, the inflammation, the misfolding of the proteins, right? And then up the corridor to the brain. So here's a couple of supplements to consider. So we've got glutathione. I like it in a liposomal. What I did in my handout was, in parentheses, I gave you two brand names, so where to get them from, because
Okay.
they're tried and tested, tried and tested. So on my website, under supplements, there is it will pull up something called Fullscripts. And Fullscripts is an online platform that has about 200 peer-reviewed, three-party assay checked out supplements. So it's, the top brands, Apex, Metagenics, Designs for Health, Thorne, etc. If you sign up there, you can get 20% off and you get free shipping over $50. And why I choose that is because I can mix and match and I can pull. I can
That's
say,
where I got that stuff from, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
You
can
give me
get
a code or something,
liposomal.
and
Yeah, you get a code. Liposomal glutathione. So if you go there and sign up, they will send you a welcome and you will be able to do that. So
what's that website again? Or the company name?
If you go to it's called Fullscripts.
That's right,
Fullscripts.
Fullscripts.
So if you go to my website, sagefunctionalhealth.com, and you go to the living resources, there's 4 boxes in there, and one of the boxes is supplements.
Okay.
And you pull that up. So liposomal glutathione. I really like Apexes because it's 3 types of glutathione. Designs for Health, Quicksilver, equally good. High DHA. Okay. I have 2 brands there that have high DHA. You want at least 1 gram a day. This is tried and true, proven for Parkinson's, that you need high levels of DHA for your brain. B12, you want to be taking B12, the methylated form of B12 daily. Turmeric curcumin, because it's an anti-inflammatory, it's a great polyphenol, and because of that exposure to that MOA inhibitor, that it works helping with Parkinson's. SPMs, because they help with the cytokine storm, and there is always an inflammatory component to all neurodegenerative diseases.
Wow, okay.
Good probiotic, a good solid probiotic. Some people may need to test for small bacterial overgrowth, and that's either a breath test is probably the best test, and you can do that with your doctor. Because if you have constant bloating and inflammation in your gut and really bad digestion, and you have an overgrowth of SIBO, you can either knock it out with an antibiotic or you can knock it out with herbs. But that constant inflammation will play into the development of the misfolding of the alpha-synuclein protein. So that's a piece to knock out. Phosphatidylcholine. So I want to talk about the phosphatidyl. So there's phosphatidylcholine, there's phosphatidylserine, and there's a researcher named Nicholson, I believe, Nicholas, and he wrote a piece on the lipid replacement therapy. And they have found that our cell membranes are like 95+% phospholipids. And what they do is they're lipophilic. So they take in fat molecules and they change them to being water soluble so we can get rid of our toxins in our urine, right? Mm-hmm. And cell membranes, if you envision them, they're like a grape. And they need to stay plump and juicy so water and nutrition can come in and waste products can exit. Mm-hmm. And this is really important for the mitochondria too. So the cell wall, so things can come in and things can come out. As the cell membranes get dehydrated from diet and aging and lack of phospholipids, they turn like raisins. They get really folded and dried and dehydrated. So it's harder to get water, nutrition in, and waste products out. So this is why I think taking some type of phosphatidylcholine product is important for neurodegenerative diseases, because you want your cell membranes to be plump. I take one called NT Factors, and I used to be able to get it on Fullscripts, but the man who created it, Nicholson, he's now branched off and created his own lab. Mm-hmm. So it's a special order from him. But there are quite a few products on there that are phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine. So mm-hmm. cell membranes become very, very important because they basically sustain our life, our membranes. Mitochondrial function. So CoQ10, I think that's pretty much known in the Parkinson's mm-hmm. community, the importance of CoQ10, 100 to say 300 milligrams. PQQ, which is a pyroquinone. NAD. So NAD is really important. Sure. The nicotinamide adenoside.
Yeah, that's a big one.
A big one. It really pushes the development of ATP, mitochondrial biogenesis, helpful for exercise, helpful for cognition. So I think that I use Quicksilver's NAD's got an NAD platinum. It's a little pricey, but it's liposomal nanoemulsified. I also think as we age, we have to start thinking about swallowing, right?
It's true.
True.
We have
Yeah.
a number of people over the years, especially they, that's a problem.
It's a
and
problem.
then choking
Yeah.
becomes a hazard,
Yes.
and then malnutrition. I mean,
Yeah.
malnutrition is actually a thing for a
The
certain part of
elderly
the Parkinson's population based on the lack of ability
to swallow.
to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that firsthand. And so this is
Yeah.
a part of the Parkinsonian symptom picture, right? So you don't want to have all these great nutrients and not be able to take them. So I like to get things emulsified, micronized, powder, liquids, as much as possible. I take my fish oils in liquid. I don't want to have fish oil capsules are quite large, and large size is not helpful. The SPM capsule is a good size, pretty small
Yeah, I like that
size.
size too.
Yeah. Metagenics vitamin D 10,000 K. Vitamin D 10,000 with K is a really, really tiny little gel cap. I like that too. Metagenics makes a CoQ10 in a chewy, a gummy. So,
Yep.
if you have CoQ10, that can also be a large size molecule. I think that's really important. L-carnitine, nicotinamine, riboside, creatine, all these components that are really important to enhance the ability to exercise, because if exercise is the number one gold standard for Parkinson's, you have to have the energy to exercise.
Yeah.
And so you have to be having CoQ10 and glutathione and NAD, and your cell membranes need to be open. You need to be eating nutrient-dense foods. I sometimes move people into liquid vitamin mineral, a multivitamin mineral liquid. There's some new companies making patches. People have emailed me about the patches. I'm not quite sure because I need to look and make sure that the B vitamins are not the cheap synthetic type. That you always want your B vitamins to be methylated. You want your folate to be methylated, the metrotetrahydrofolate, the B12 to be methylated. Under certain circumstances, there's a few people who need a hydroxy form or cobalamine's okay, but those people only know with genetic testing. That's not like something they just know, right? So there are so many great supplements out there, but this is kind of I narrowed it down to kind of the key nutrients that would be involved for mitochondria, and then the key nutrients to sustain what is known about Parkinson's. And then iron if you need it, of course. And I didn't even go into detoxification suggestions because that's quite complicated. But and having a regular bowel movement, simple things like there's a magnesium called Mag-O7. That is the only time I ever direct somebody to Amazon, because you can't get Mag-O7 on Fullscripts. And Fullscripts, these has a climate controlled warehouse that is good manufacturing practices. It's 3 different parties come to look at the manufacturing, look at the facilities, where when you're buying supplements on Amazon, you have no idea what third party they came from, what pallet they're sitting on in Arizona at 116 degrees for a month, right? How rancid those oils got. There's a company called Zymogen, which is a high level, wonderful nutraceutical company. They only private label. They don't sell to anyone but physicians. Every couple months, they have to take down fraudulent people who buy bottles, copy their labels, put it up. They don't even know what's in the nutrients. Don't even know what's in the capsules. They have to notify Amazon. They have to do a fraudulent complaint. So I just really want the buyer to be aware that, you have to be careful. But again, my example is this Mag-O7. It's an oxygenated form of magnesium oxide, and it's very helpful for constipation. So if you are running constipated, you have to be taking really good magnesium and good vitamin C. And this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I did see some recent research that high levels of magnesium stop L-DOPA from being absorbed. And that would be important, because if people were taking high levels of magnesium for constipation, I didn't look at the dosages of magnesium that was in that study. I just heard it on somebody's podcast. So Yeah, it gets tricky.
So
But
beware.
beware.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
We all need magnesium. We're a magnesium deficient society. We lose it with stress. We lose it with Wi-Fi. We lose it with EMFs. So we all need some magnesium daily. I believe it's not in the
interesting.
soils like it used to be. We used to
Yeah.
put magnesium in the water, like in the
Oh,
30s and
really? Oh,
40s,
I
and they
didn't know
stopped
that.
doing that. They used to put lithium in the water. Our water was lithiumated. Lithium turns out is to be actually really helpful for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's because it's neuroprotective
Hmm.
and it is an anti-inflammatory in the brain, lithium.
Wow. Yeah.
And it
I had
also
no
has
idea
a
about that.
mechanism, lithium orotate we're talking about.
Hmm.
So the lithium carbonate is the lithium that is, prescribed for bipolar, but lithium orotate is a natural mineral that has neuroprotective properties.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Um, there's something I just thought of. It had to do with you were talking about. So going back to nutrient deficient. Oh, this is it doesn't really matter, but I'll ask anyways. The Full Scripts warehouse, are they Vancouver based? Are they in
They're
Canada somewhere?
the United States.
They are okay.
Yeah,
They're West Coast though, right?
West Coast, but
Yeah.
they have an East Coast warehouse,
Oh, okay.
so they can get things out in usually 2 days. Most people have
Yeah.
their products in
Oh,
two
I know
days.
what I'm thinking of Vladimir.
Oh, the
Yeah, yeah.
peptides.
I'm thinking of peptides. He's
Yes.
Vancouver, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the horizon for these neurodegenerative diseases, we're going to be moving into a lot of nasal inhalers.
Yeah.
There's nasal glutathione.
Hmm.
There's nasal vasoactive intestinal peptide,
Hmm.
and then there's all these peptides, and these peptides have the capacity to regenerate tissue, somewhat like stem cell.
Hmm.
And I think that I don't know people doing particular research for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's with peptides, but those of us who know about the peptides, we take peptides for different reasons. I
Hmm.
take a thymosin peptide for my immune system. There's a lung peptide, Taxarest, that I give to my daughter for her lungs. So these peptides have great capacity.
Yeah, I'd like to talk with you more about that off camera because I'm doing well, but I want to do better.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep reversing what I have reversed a little bit of. Man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Having you here has been so amazing.
It's great.
Um, where can people contact you if they want information or they want to maybe become a patient like me?
My website, so sagefunctionalhealth.com,
Okay.
and then my email, sagefunctionalhealth@gmail.com. And many people who are in Syracuse or upstate New York who know me, my email is drv@vitalhealth@gmail. I'm going to keep that Gmail and that website up for a year
Okay.
because my website just was published last week, so it's going to be a slow conversion. I'm going to just
It looks nice, by the way. It looks
Thank you.
real good.
check out 2 different
You
websites
put
for
a
a
lot of
while.
work into that. It's
I
taken a
did.
while.
I did.
Yeah.
It took me a year.
Good website takes a while, but
Yeah.
it looks fantastic.
Thank you.
A lot of resources, a lot of information.
Yeah. I've been
So,
giving out
mhm,
resources for my whole life without putting them in one place. And
mhm.
it just became, it was like, I cannot believe that I just don't land
Yeah.
these on a landing page, right?
Yeah.
So that's my project.
Well, so you know where to get hold of Dr. Viencek, how to contact her. I'll make sure the website link, your email is in the descriptions. Sherie, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you
so
Thank
much.
you, Carl. Yeah,
I
give me
mean,
the
my
chance.
brain is, I'm going to be watching this and listening a lot because I already have pages and pages of notes just sitting here. But I need to break it down, go back, break it down, and because there's so much to it, right?
Oh,
There's
there's
so
so
much to
much.
us as humans and our systems and our how everything works together.
Yeah.
You know, and if one system, I always teach, if one system isn't functioning optimally, all these other ones are brought down by default to some degree, even if it's
Absolutely.
minute. Even if it's minute, you know, we can go from neuromusculoskeletal, just those 3 alone. If one thing is off, a broken bone, a torn muscle, something happening in the spinal column or the brain, it can really affect our quality of life. And we don't move optimally. Well, that's just that. I mean, all these other things too.
Yeah. That reminds me, this is, you're talking about protein and swallowing and sarcopenia as we get older. Over 35% of the population over the age of 60 does not make enough hydrochloric acid. And hydrochloric acid in the stomach is essential for the breakdown of protein.
Oh.
And if we're not breaking down our protein, we're not getting our amino acids, and then we lose our building blocks. So I do a lot of muscle testing and a lot of other testing, and almost all of, my patients are on some type of digestive enzyme, but very much an enzyme that has some HCl and very often some ox bile to thin the bile because HCl, hydrochloric acid.
Okay, got it.
Because ox bile thins the bile, and bile is essential for the emulsification of fat, and toxins are in fat. So I like to combine a little ox bile and a little bit of HCl, and Designs for Health has a product called Digestozyme that has both of those things in it. But very often the muscle piece with the mitochondria is just having people on a digestive enzyme and also taking amino acids. There's a company called Genesta. He's out of California. He makes his own amino acids. They're a full spectrum. Sometimes just giving people amino acid capsules and helping them digest protein, within about 3 months, they start to gain muscle mass. And then if you throw on some trophic hormones, if they're low in DHEA and testosterone, both would help a lot with muscle, you can really turn somebody around in their exercise capacity in about 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, that's really good to know because, it all ties in together. I always look at this relationship between, let's say, way later, a lot of times way later years, or more elderly, if you will.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, it could be younger too. It just depends on the person, where they're not moving well, bone density is compromised, partially because of muscle mass depletion or diminished, muscle mass. And now you have diminished ability to do all this stuff. So you've got to get it back, and getting it back, if there are other complications like, lack of dopamine or all these other things that the
CoQ10
messing with the mitochondria and the ATP.
Yeah.
But if you got all those things happening that aren't giving you that energy, we're talking about some really potentially maybe not that hard to fix things that can really change quality of life. I mean, can't guarantee anything, right? I mean, everyone's different, but being aware of this stuff and having the ability to at least start some type of intervention to give you some energy to do something that help you build muscle and move better. Right. There we go.
Yeah. So not only does glutathione go down over 50, so does CoQ10. So CoQ10 starts amping down after 50, and you can look this up and see how much it goes down. And those two are really crucial for Parkinson's, right?
Yeah,
CoQ10.
We should do a part 2 really soon.
Yeah.
Part 3.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Something else about CoQ10. The other thing too is, like, I think probably almost everybody knows this, but in case somebody doesn't, if you are on a statin interferes with CoQ10. It blocks your CoQ10. And so there was a physician that did a piece out of the University of Miami and said that if people are put on statins and they're not given CoQ10, he would consider that malpractice. And so think about that. If you're on a statin, you are at risk for not only your cholesterol dropping down too low, but you're also at risk for your CoQ10 dropping down too low, which CoQ10 is important for mitochondrial biogenesis. So here is a great explanation of fatigue. This is somebody who isn't having their hormones that they're used to having, and they're not having their CoQ10. And CoQ10 deficiency is directly related to congestive heart failure because the heart requires tremendous amounts of CoQ10 for contractibility. So that's another piece.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll just stop here.
I could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Well, again,
okay.
Thank you
Carl.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And then thanks to everybody who's watching.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah.
Website's in the description, email's in the description. Contact Dr. Viencek if you have any questions. Check out our website. Thanks again for watching.
Thank you.
Have a great day, folks.
Yeah.